because I really think 86 might be the best year of metal. But anyway, while 1982 is often overlooked, it stands as a crucial year in the evolution of heavy music across genres like metal, rock, new wave, and hardcore punk. By this year, heavy music not only solidified itself as more than just dinosaur rock, but began to establish itself as a genre with distinct, enduring subgenres. Amid the new wave craze, Thriller became the best selling album of all time, showcasing Eddie Van Halen's blistering guitar solo on Beat It and a driving rhythm section that hinted at metal and heavy music's power in mainstream music. Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast, featuring Bruce Dickinson's powerful vocals for the first time, was another critical release, laying the groundwork for thrash metal and inspiring the genesis of, wait for it, hair metal. While hair metal may have diverged in tempo and intensity from the new wave of British heavy metal, or Nawabum, as us true Gen X and older metalheads call it, it distilled the movement's rebellious energy into a more accessible, commercialized format, making it both a product and response to the increasingly corporatized landscape of popular music. There's a playlist for this episode that I linked in the chat comments, and I should have linked it in the description for the show. So if you're listening to this show, it's definitely going to be linked in the description. And if you're watching it, by the time the show's over, I will add it to the description. But I posted it on all the social medias. I was very proud of it, by the way. But this episode's playlist delves into essential albums from 1982, spotlighting tracks that capture the moment's raw energy and foreshadow these seismic shifts in heavy music, featuring groundbreaking work from Ozzy Osbourne, Iron Maiden, and other artists shaping the heavy music scene. That this curated collection serves as both an homage and critique of the era's rapid evolution, offering listeners a taste of the year when heavy music began to assert itself as a lasting cultural force. I think I'm getting a message from my guest, who is very tardy at the moment. But I do want to ask you guys a question. I think because I don't have a guest, I'm going to open up phone lines. So you have to give me a second for that before I do that. But one thing I did find interesting about this time in heavy music is a lot of older artists are making records around the same time. And the records that they're making for the early 80s, it really feels like, and I think maybe me and Conan touched on this a little bit because we did talk about the year 1982 in music, because so many genres are really, I don't want to say coming into their own, but there's some great albums that come out in 82. I think Conan and I probably talked for about 20, 30 minutes on The Cure's Pornography album that comes out in 82, which I don't think has any singles on it. But for a lot of people, it's a very important record. Um, but I bring up 82 and these more establishment rock bands because I was watching this really interesting interview with Steve-O, of all people, from Jackass, and Paul Stanley. And I think I've said before on the show, I actually got a chance to run into Paul Stanley when I worked for Yo Gabba Gabba and talk to him for a little bit. Um, Way more down to earth than I thought he'd be. Because I had ran into Gene Simmons once at a NAMM convention, and he was as you think Gene Simmons would be at a NAMM convention. But Paul Stanley was like super chill, actually, and quite a joy to be around and talk to. Um, he's the kind of guy that would remember your name. Not every celebrity is good at that, and the ones that are, you see why they have such a long time on top, because it's the little things like that. Anyway, Paul Stanley had said something. Steve-O asked him, like, hey, did you know you were going to be around for so long? Blah, 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 blah. Right. And Paul Stanley goes, there was no blueprint when we started doing music with Kiss, because he goes, "What? The Beatles were around for what, like 7 years?" He goes, "I just wanted 5 years. If I could just have 5 years, um, doing this music thing, I would have been excited." And I thought about that because I was like, "Oh, yeah, they started, like, what, 73, 74. I think their first record comes out. And who in the rock world has been around that long and relevant? Maybe the Beach Boys? Um, maybe the Kinks? I'm literally trying to rack my brain, like, who's been the Rolling Stones were, of course, around, but, with every year for these people, it's like, "Oh, damn, we're still around. Oh, damn, we're still relevant. Oh, damn, we can still play these venues." But in the '80s, some of these bands make these records that sound like they're trying to capture a more modern sound. And if you stick around long enough, you're popular long enough, you'll find yourself no longer being a trendsetter and you'll find yourself chasing trends. A perfect example of this is Metallica's Saint Anger album, or Stanger, as I like to call it. Um, I don't like that record. I don't know too many people that do like that record. Now, I will say, as I drink from my Metallica mug, right? Um, this is totally bootleg, by the way. Um, I've heard that record with a correction on the drums where someone either AI'd it or they actually. I've heard one guy literally replay the snare. There's one dude, if you hate that record, but kind of mild, even if you like old Metallica stuff, there's a dude. God, this is about 10 years ago. He literally went and replayed everything and he cleaned up that snare. There's someone that I believe AI'd it and they shortened the songs because some of those songs are just too long. Like Metallica had this, we write the long songs. It's like, look, and Justice for All is a little too long. Those 8 songs shouldn't be damn near 90 minutes. But anyway, as someone that has written his fair share of songs that are too long. but but the point is, when you listen to Saint Anger, even when you look at the change in the instruments they were playing, you know, pointy instruments don't really ride in the late 90s through the mid 2000s like they did in the 80s and early part of the 90s. They're not cool, if you will. And um there's like flames on it's funny. And if you watch the Some Kind of Monster documentary, then you see them fighting with Kurt Hammett because, like, we're not going to do any guitar solos. And when you listen to that record, and I've gone back and listened to it a few times to like write things, and you read some of the interviews, I think you can't just listen to it and not read what was going on in their mind. Because after I heard it, I was like, what? I want to know what you were thinking, guys. And they were like, we want to get back to this raw sound, blah, 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 blah. Now, raw sound, when you listen to Kill 'Em All and then listen to Ride the Lightning, those are very different records, extremely different records. There is a raw sound on Kill 'Em All. It's very polished on Ride the Lightning, and you can hear what's going to be Master of Puppets, right? You can tell they're getting over the we're kind of novice players thing. We really know what we're doing, but we just can't nail it yet on Ride the Lightning, and I think they nail it on Master of Puppets. But that being said, this is groundbreaking work. Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. For a lot of people, and Justice for All, groundbreaking work. Then they hit the stratosphere with the Black Record. And they're mega stars when Load and Unload come out. They're super huge, bigger than they ever thought they'd imagine they'd be. But critically, people have something to say. I remember when they cut their hair for, was it the first Load or the second Load? That was the cover of are a California news magazine called BAM Magazine, Bay Area Magazine. I think they changed the name to something more statewide, but um, it was and Haircuts for All or something like that. And then the Alice in Chains, MTV Unplugged, where I believe it's Jerry Cantrell writes on his guitar, "Friends don't let friends get haircuts." You know, it's like you guys are Samson, man. You can't cut your hair. But they still had extreme success, but they weren't innovative and groundbreaking anymore. And so they tried to chase that with Saint Anger. Yikes. Not a fun record. Again, I can't see the comments because it's coming out of a different side. I don't want to look down. But I don't know how you guys feel about that record. I myself am not a fan. Um there's some albums that come out in 82 from establishment bands, and I was gonna put them on this list, but I couldn't in good conscience. If you listen to the whole 82 show playlist, of course, because every album that came out in 82, I try to put it on there. I definitely have the Queen stuff and the Who stuff, which again, I tried. But what I did do to kind of try to show that, I put a Robert Plant solo cut on there. And I listened to that and I was like, this is not good. This album is horrible. The Queen record that came out in 82, you get Under Pressure out of it, which, that's like the last song on the record as well. Great song. Who can deny that song? Vanilla Ice, love that song. It was so good. It was maybe a bigger hit as a sample in the early part of the 90s. Who can forget that bass line? The rest of that album is extremely forgettable. I dare anyone to tell me, oh, that Who record in 82 is like one of my favorites. Like, no, it's not. You're lying. You're totally lying. But I found that interesting that these establishment artists, and again, with a band like Led Zeppelin, the last few records, what would they have been had Bonham stayed? I don't know. You would have had to have the Addiction albums. Another album that's on here is, I believe it's not Night in the Ruts. I can't remember the Aerosmith record, but by the early 80s, Aerosmith is going through member changes, and they're in the bowels of their addictions. It's like really bad for them. But there's a few songs on some of those records that I found pretty good, as far as Aerosmith goes from that era. It's definitely not Toys in the Attic, but they managed to salvage some good stuff. Another thing I put on the playlist that I found interesting was Whitesnake re-released a lot of songs, because I can't remember the producer that got his hands on Whitesnake in the 80s, but Whitesnake was a band that had this amazing frontman and really good guitar player, John Sykes. But there was a producer that felt like, I never thought their songs were good enough. They were just mediocre songs with this amazing frontman. So he gets in there and he really pops them up. And if you go back and listen to the 1987 Whitesnake record with all the hits, that are a lot of them are replays. I have the original Here I Go Again on there. There's some mild changes to the music. You can hear where they clean it up, and it is, you understand when you hear like, oh, that's what a producer does. And there's a few word changes in there that make this song sound so different. And I find the 80s is kind of interesting time where you can take a band like Whitesnake that literally released this record already. I wouldn't say to critical acclaim. Whitesnake was never critically acclaimed, but can literally put out another song, put out the same song 5 years later, and have it be such a large hit that David Coverdale can get out of the record label debt he was in, the tax debt he was in, as many of us are that do music seriously.